The night was calm, the moon casting a soft glow over the land as Scheherazade began her tale. The flickering of the fire illuminated her face, and King Shahryar, lost in the spell of her storytelling, listened intently.
O king, you have heard of the perils of jealousy, of the consequences of unchecked desire. Now, let me tell you the tale of the king and the hermit, a story of power, humility, and the unexpected wisdom that can be found in the most unlikely of places. Once, in a distant kingdom, there was a mighty king named Mustafa who ruled over a prosperous and vast land. His kingdom was rich in treasures, and he held sway over every aspect of his people's lives. Yet, despite his wealth and power, the king was restless. He longed for something that money and power could not provide. The weight of his rule pressed heavily on him, and he found little joy in his daily affairs. King Mustafa had everything a man could wish for: luxurious palaces, servants at his beck and call, and a court full of advisors and nobles. But he was not content. He would often gaze out over his kingdom and wonder why he felt so empty inside. His heart was burdened, and he could not find peace. One day, while walking through his palace gardens, King Mustafa met an old, humble man who had wandered into the royal grounds. The man wore simple robes, and his face was lined with age. He was known to be a hermit who lived a solitary life in the mountains, far from the comforts of the kingdom. The king, intrigued by this man's calm and peaceful demeanor, approached him. The hermit greeted the king with a smile and said, "Your Majesty, I see that you are troubled. What weighs heavily on your heart?" The king, surprised by the hermit's insight, replied, "I am burdened by the responsibilities of my throne. I have everything a man could desire, yet I find no happiness. What is the secret to contentment? Where can I find peace?" The hermit looked at him for a moment and then replied, "You have sought contentment in wealth and power, but neither can grant you true peace. The secret to happiness lies in humility, in simplicity, and in living a life that is in harmony with the world around you." King Mustafa, though intrigued by the hermit's words, was skeptical. "But I am a king," he said. "I cannot abandon my kingdom and live as you do, in a cave or in the wilderness. My life is one of responsibility and grandeur. How can simplicity bring me peace?" The hermit smiled again and said, "I do not suggest you abandon your kingdom, but perhaps you should spend some time away from it. Go on a journey to find the wisdom that eludes you. Take time to reflect on your life and the true nature of your desires." The king, desperate for answers, decided to follow the hermit's advice. He donned a simple cloak and, without informing his court, set out on a journey into the wilderness. He traveled for many days, crossing mountains, rivers, and vast deserts, seeking the answers that had eluded him for so long. During his travels, the king met many humble people: farmers, merchants, and shepherds whose lives were far from the luxury he had known. Yet, despite their hardships, these people seemed content. They lived simple lives, focused on family, work, and faith. The king began to see that the simplicity of their lives gave them a sense of peace and fulfillment that he had never experienced. One evening, after a long day's journey, the king came across a small village nestled in a valley. He entered the village and was greeted warmly by the villagers, who offered him food and shelter. As he sat around the fire, listening to their stories and laughter, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The villagers spoke of their hardships, but also of their gratitude for the simple pleasures in life, the warmth of family, the beauty of nature, and the joy of helping one another. The king, moved by their words, realized that he had been chasing something that could never bring him true happiness. It was not power or wealth that he needed, but a sense of connection to others, to the land, and to himself. The next morning, King Mustafa continued his journey, and after many days, he found himself at the hermit's dwelling in the mountains. The hermit greeted him with a knowing smile, as if he had been expecting the king's return. The king knelt before the hermit and said, "I have learned much on my journey, and I see now that the peace I sought was not to be found in power, but in simplicity and humility. I have witnessed the joy that comes from living a life in harmony with the world, and I understand now that happiness is not something to be acquired, but something to be embraced." The hermit nodded and said, "You have found the answer you sought, Your Majesty. True contentment comes not from what you possess, but from the way you live and the love you give." With the hermit's blessing, King Mustafa returned to his kingdom, but he was forever changed. He ruled with wisdom and humility, and though he still held power, he used it not to amass wealth, but to serve the people. He lived a life of balance, and in doing so, found the peace he had once sought in vain. And so the king learned that the greatest treasure of all is not found in the riches one accumulates, but in the way one lives and the love one gives. And so ends the tale of the king and the hermit. May it serve as a reminder that true happiness is not found in power or material wealth, but in simplicity, humility, and the connections we forge with others.
When Scheherazade heard the rooster crow, she decided to stop telling stories. Shahryar smiled and realized that Scheherazade would not tell any more. Of course, he had a new date the next night to continue enjoying the stories of his beautiful wife, Scheherazade. King Shahryar sat in silence, his mind turning over the wisdom of the tale. The fire continued to burn brightly, its warmth and light offering a small solace in the stillness of the night.